Hi, I'm Joan Goodchild, and welcome to SC Media's continued coverage of 2023's Women in IT Security. I'm joined today by Pam Schwamb, IT Risk Manager Lead with Conquest Cyber. She is one of 20 honorees that we're shining a spotlight on in the coming day for their contributions to the larger IT and cybersecurity community. Thanks for joining us, Pam.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm really happy to be here with you.
So let's start by talking about you and your background and how you found your way into a career in cybersecurity. Give us some background there and tell us your story.
Yeah, sure. So my background did not start in cybersecurity, which I think is pretty common for a lot of us. I actually started as a database consultant. So straight out of college, I started working for a large healthcare organization, and I spent many years operating in recovery management, disaster recovery for databases. And after doing that for several years, kind of became a little routine for me, and disaster recovery should never feel routine. So I moved out of that organization and I moved into architecture. I spent many years doing technical architecture and design for a variety of types of systems. At that point in time, I had to make a move and I had to physically move away from where my company was based. And as part of that, I had to make a change in jobs. And so I switched over to start working on a project specific to the Department of Defense. And we were working on the electronic health record modernization project. Specifically, my team was working on stuff that is forward deployed. So systems that will go out into the field that run on top of a laptop, which, before this had never been done. And we were told it couldn't be done. And we had a lot of challenges to overcome, both technically, taking a large system, scaling it down, but also figuring out how to secure a system that has never really abided by DoD standards and figuring out how to bridge that gap and bring it into compliance. We were very successful in that project, and I learned a lot. And that was my first foray into cybersecurity. So once we kind of landed that and everything was sort of under control, the larger organization was really struggling to get a lot of compliance requirements in place for the other solutions that we were pushing through in a more traditional EHR environment. And as part of that, my team got pulled in and we effectively just consulted throughout the company to help them figure out how to take where they were and get to where they needed to be. And so it gave me this incredible broad exposure for the concept of like security and compliance across a variety of different architectures, a variety of different types of solutions, different teams, different perspectives, from the administrative perspective all the way down to the engineering perspective. Kind of bridged from there over to the VA project where my expertise became identity and access management. And that is basically my foundational knowledge around cybersecurity. I took a little bit of time off after that project because it was a lot. It was a really big project and a lot to learn. And I highly encourage people, if they feel like maybe now's a good time to take a break, maybe now's a good time to take a break. But coming back from that break, I have had the opportunity to come on board with Conquest Cyber. And it has been an absolutely incredible experience to take all of that knowledge that I fundamentally learned operating in a DoD environment and bringing that to clients who don't necessarily have to abide by that level of standard and who are not at that level of maturity, and to be able to take everything that we've learned and help them fundamentally build these programs from the ground up.
That's great. Now, speaking of Conquest Cyber and speaking of these kind of long-term projects, you recently worked on an authorization package
Yeah.
at Conquest Cyber, which was quite an undertaking. Tell us about your work in that area.
Yeah, we're actually still working through that authorization package right now. So that's an ongoing project for us. So for anybody who's not familiar with working on an ATO for the Department of Defense, it is quite an undertaking. A lot of times in security, when we talk about compliance and regulatory requirements, we will look at things like, CMMC or SOC, and these are either self-attested controls or they are things that are very process-oriented and at a high level questions of like, do you do this? Like, how do you do this? And they're more conversational. When you get into an ATO, you get very, very granular down to each individual system and proving how you are meeting all of those controls at every individual level of your system. So in your databases, in your operating systems, in your, access control and management procedures for every application that you run in your environment. And they can be very painstaking and they can be very heavy in documentation. So it's been a lot. I call myself extremely lucky. I have an incredible team around me who they rally and they will get anything done. And, we work across an organization that is incredibly agile, and anywhere that we have encountered areas that we maybe aren't really meeting where we need to be, or there are gaps, areas that we could do better, we're able to really quickly just address those and turn them over, which it's a really great experience. Like just being a part of something that can move so quickly and being surrounded by people who all have kind of that same passion and that same desire and drive that I do.
And in reading about the project too, there was a notation about how much manual labor is really needed to touch every system and a lot of the paperwork involved. Is that kind of in the trenches sort of work a place where you thrive, or, do you find it difficult?
Right.
I mean, what's it like for that, for you?
Yeah. Some days it's you wake up and you're like, why do I do this? But but when you turn it all around and you actually like get to the point where you have this full picture of your system, from top to bottom, and you can stand back and look at it and go, man, look what we've created, you guys. This is something really cool. I think conceptually you can always know that, right? But until you've turned around and really documented it and talked it and tested it, you don't necessarily have that same feeling of accomplishment that you do when it's all said and done. I think, personally, I take a lot of pride in accomplishing an ATO. It's a lot of work and it's a huge uplift. And yeah, I'm really excited to see this one all the way through, and I have no doubt that it'll land really cleanly here in the short term.
That's great. So we're talking about women in IT security as part of our coverage this week, and you're one of the honorees. So let's talk a little bit about your experience as a woman in IT security in this industry, in an environment where you may have at times been one of the only women in the room. What has it been like for you over the years? Do you feel like you still continue to be one of the only women in the room? Are you seeing changes there? And what has your experience been like from that perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I started my career in basic IT, not even like dabbling into security. And I think the question of like, are there women in this industry? Like how many women are there? 15 years ago, give or take, when I got my start, there really weren't a lot. Almost everybody I worked with was a guy. And I became really comfortable working in an environment like that, right? I had a few women that I worked with early on who were wonderful. So hello, ladies. But it wasn't something that was incredibly common, and you just kind of got used to operating in this environment. A part of me always kind of hates this question, if I'm completely honest, like what's it like being a woman in cyber? Because to me, like it shouldn't feel any different, right? Like there are definitely some days where I'll walk into a room and I'll sit down at a table and I look around and I'm like, well, that's like 12 guys wearing three-piece suits and me. So that's fun. But as soon as you start talking, right, like you realize it's never about your gender. It's never about like your individual identifiers. It's really about what's up here, right? Like what are you bringing to the table and how are you like adding to that situation? And for myself, like that's never really felt like a challenge. Now, one thing that I absolutely do notice is that there do seem to be a lot more women joining into this industry, or at least that I'm interacting with a lot more. At Conquest, like there are many women that I work with. Half my team is women. And so it's really nice to be able to walk in and know, like it doesn't matter to me, like what you're coming in as, like a guy, a girl, that's fine because you bring the same thing to the table. Yeah.
Now, your nominator also mentioned in the materials that they sent over that you've really been passionate about efforts to get many other women into the field of cybersecurity. So, how are you working on that? How do you foster those kinds of initiatives in your career?
Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily actively will go out and, recruit women, but I am always down to sit down and have conversations around what it's like being in this field and working in this field. For me, a really big passion and one of the things that brings me a lot of joy is just sharing the knowledge that I have and teaching. And it's always about context. I'm a big storyteller. I teach through stories. And so sitting down and just having those conversations and bringing in more than just like the technical side of it, allowing people to kind of talk about, like what are their feelings and, what's bringing them to this field, what are their questions, their concerns, and just being open to having those conversations, I think has been really helpful.
Why do you think it's important to have diversity in the industry, going beyond gender, whether we're talking about different kinds of backgrounds, races, any other, kinds of types of diversity that we strive for in initiatives? Why is that important specifically to the cybersecurity field?
Yeah, I think cyber has a really interesting perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're all doing is we're trying to protect ourselves against threat actors, right? So the threat actor is the person on the other side of the system who's trying to get to your data. They're trying to get into your system. They're trying to interrupt your business processes. And if we are only sitting here as a homogenous group of people who've all had very similar backgrounds and lives, how do we put ourselves in the shoes of those threat actors and truly like think diversely about like all of the attack vectors that we're going to need to be working with, right? Now, if we expand our population and we start bringing in people from, different ethnicities and different religions, different backgrounds, different creeds, whatever it is, we start to get all of these different perspectives on life and these different experiences that people have had, which gives us more opportunity at being successful in actually circumventing these threat actors.
An important perspective for sure. Did you have any, heroes, mentors, inspirations, anyone that has inspired you along the way in your career?
Oh, I do, but he'll be really mad if I call him out on this call. Honestly, one of the people that has been absolutely instrumental in my career is one of the gentlemen that I still work with today. His name is Dan McIntyre, and I have worked with him off and on since I was a very, very young consultant. So I've known him for about 13, 14 years now. And it's just the passion that he brings to the table every single day, the criticality with which he looks at things, the ability to think outside of the box is so inspiring. And there has yet to be a challenge that I have seen him walk up to that he feels like he needs to walk away from, And he has done nothing but encourage me in my career and everything that I do. And I feel like I can have a very open and honest relationship where I can talk about more than just, like, oh, I'm struggling on this project, because X, Y, and Z blocker. I can talk about, I'm struggling on this project because I have these blockers, but really there's all this other stuff happening in my life that's making this really hard for me right now, right? And I think it's really important because it really humanizes like the industry, and it's really easy to get lost in IT. I think, we work really long hours, we work really tough jobs, and we have really high metrics that we have to meet. So having somebody that I can look up to who has always treated me like with respect and like has really personalized me has been really big for me in my career.
What kind of lesson do you think you've taken away from, kind of what you valued and learning from him, sort of resilience, sticking with something when it gets tough, that kind of thing?
Resiliency and adaptability. Those are the two words that come to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So just as we're closing up here, a couple more questions. I mean, what's next for you? What kinds of things are you hoping to accomplish, or goals do you have in your career in the next year or 5 years? What are you thinking about when you're not really busy with that authorization package?
Yeah. So for me, one of the reasons that I came on board at Conquest, right, is the product that we deliver. And it's an executive dashboard and operational tactical tool that we can actually use to deliver cybersecurity programs. And it's honestly what drew me to this organization. So over the next year, as I get out of this ATO and I get my life back, as for anybody who's been through an ATO, they'll appreciate that. But as that starts to happen, like it's turning around and looking at how do we take this product and how do I make it so that next year when I'm sitting here going through all of the audits that I'm doing manually right now, that those are more automated, that they're more resilient, they're more resistant to failure, right? And how am I catching things that I should be catching earlier? I'm starting to put that level of intelligence into software that can actually make us do things better, not just in the form of being able to meet compliance, right? But in actually pushing security. Because I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is we spend so much time doing documentation and so much time correlating data between systems that we're not really looking for the security flaws, right? We're just looking at how we can check a box. And threat actors don't care about your box. They'll operate outside the box every day, so we have to as well. But that doesn't mean that we can ignore it. So if we can make it easier and more seamless to do the mundane day-to-day work, now we can put our efforts and our time into the more critical components of actually like delivering security in our systems. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve in the next year.
Great. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So Pam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great being here.
And thanks to you for watching. For now, on behalf of SC Media, I'm Joan Goodchild. Have a good day.